That's great. For your familial book club, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. Okay. For all these gifts, O God, we thank you, we sing your praises, and we say Amen. There's an image that perhaps you've seen it online, or maybe if you've taken any sort of social action or social justice training. Gerald is going to share it in the chat box. Originally crafted by Craig Frohl, I don't know how to say his name. This one's by Misha Rahman and the Great Heart Consulting. I'm going to show it here, and I know it won't be the easiest image to see, but we're going to do what we can. There's an image. I think originally it had only 3 boxes, and I'm going to describe it as well if it's hard to see. But it describes essentially equality, equity, and justice. It starts with reality. The reality is that a few people have more than they need. Many have just what they need. Most have not enough. In this case, we can see that there's one person on 3 crates. You can see over the fence. The image, by the way, they're all trying to watch a soccer game, right? That's the idea. Football for our British friends. They're all trying to watch a soccer game. The one kid in the middle has these 3 boxes. He can see. This guy's dug into a hole. He can't see. And she's in a wheelchair. She can't see. So that's reality. And then it goes into explaining each step afterwards. Equality, well, let's be equal. Let's give everyone a box. Unfortunately, that works out for the tall guy really well. It works decently enough for the kid. And the one in the wheelchair still can't see. So it's equal. It's equality, but it's still not right. Equity is even better. Let's make a way for everyone to have exactly what they need. The person who doesn't need the crate at all, okay, he gives up his crate. Now the person in the middle has it. And the third person, well, she needs a ramp. So now she has her wheelchair. That's equity. And of course, justice is tearing down the systems that set up that inequality in the first place. The final picture has no fence at all. Everyone can just see. And I like this image for a few reasons. One, it's a great symbol, a great metaphor to explain it all. There are other ones out there. This one's just the one I chose. Equality does not always mean fair, right? Fair is not always equal. For those of us who have worked with kids in any way, shape, or form, we know that doesn't have to be equal for it to be fair. And whether we agree with these definitions or not, someone would say, oh, actually, equality is this and equity is that. The point, right, is that sometimes we need different levels of support. Sometimes we need to spread things around and have it be different. And that's something our Torah portion calls for this week. As I mentioned, we're in Re'eh, mostly a series of laws on everything from worship to false prophets to dietary laws to pilgrimage festivals to how to set up a just society, including things like taxation or the Shemitah year. We read, Miket Sheva Shanim Ta'aseh Shemitah. Every 7th year you shall practice remission of debts. And it says, all creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their neighbor. They shall not oppress their kin. Essentially, and then it continues, there shall be no needy among you. And then basically says, if there's a needy person among you, don't close your hand. Open your hands freely. Open your hearts. So in other words, every 7 years, debt is forgiven. And God imagines a world in which there are no needy people because everyone in society is working together to create that world. Rabbi Jill Jacobs, she's a conservative rabbi. She's the head of Truah, the rabbinic call for human rights, and she's the author of a book, There Shall Be No Needy. She offers a teaching based on this reading. In addition to narrowing the gap between rich and poor, the Shemitah year, the 7th year, offers a glimpse of what a more equal distribution of wealth might look like. Living through the Shemitah year without experiencing disastrous consequences may open people up to a different sense of economic possibility. The wealthy may learn that they can get by with somewhat less, and that increased fortunes of the poor may not directly affect the quality of life of the wealthy. She continues, if the people resist the effort to accumulate wealth at the expense of caring for others, then poverty will not arise among them. If, however, the opportunity to own land proves so tempting that the people single-mindedly pursue their own fortunes, then poverty will return. So she lifts up 2 key points, Rabbi Jacobs. First, the Torah directs us to work toward a world in which the wealth gap shrinks, or maybe even disappears entirely. Every 7 years, we redistribute some of the wealth by eliminating debt. In this ideal world, the wealthy can let go of some of what they have. The poor can experience an increase in the quality of life. And if this happens, if they do it willingly, then there will be no needy. But if they don't do it, if they can't do it, then there will be. And the second point she brings up is that we see a blending of the moral and the religious, the ethical and the ritual. These things for the rabbis are all tied together. It's not, oh, this category here you have the civil law, and this category here you have religious. It's all mushed together. I have another rabbi, Tamar Elad Appelman. She's also a scholar, and she says this: the language of faith is the language of morality. A life of faith is not a spiritual life disengaged from society, nor is it an alternative to living in the world by seeking to escape from reality. On the contrary, a life of faith is measured by the interface between spirit and morality, and in the question of whether they are both actualized in reality. We must be concerned with our colleagues' money, our neighbors' financial situation, whether they are gainfully employed and are making ends meet, if they have health insurance, if they have food in the refrigerator. These are all questions that must concern a person of faith. As Jews, she continues, we are not called to live lives of abstinence. We may enjoy material prosperity, even wealth, as long as we never allow that wealth to engender arrogance of a lack of justice for all and their material well-being. So in other words, this is a key point of Deuteronomy. All the laws, as I said, mixed together, the civil and the capital, the religious and the secular, the spiritual and the moral. And so taking care of the less fortunate in our community is not only the right thing to do from a lens of social justice, but it's also a morally correct thing to do and a Jewishly correct thing to do. And so living a good Jewish life, which I don't usually like to, I don't like to say who's a good Jew, who's a bad Jew, but living a good Jewish life means working toward equity for all. It's like our image from the beginning, not just making things equal, but making things equitable or even truly just. And this is not a partisan issue. It's not a candidate's issue. It is a Jewish issue, and it is a human issue. This is something that Jews United for Justice, JUFJ, has been working on for 25 years. Their mission, JUFJ's mission, as they say, is to advance economic, racial, and social justice in Maryland and DC by educating and mobilizing our local Jewish communities to action. They believe that one day, everyone in DC and Maryland will have what they need to live and thrive, and a real voice in democracy, no matter the color of their skin, where they're from, or how much money they have. And so they have various actions and campaigns and community organizing and interfaith coalitions, and so they work towards social, racial, and economic justice. And so tonight we're partnering with JUFJ for their Labor on the Bimah campaign. We commemorate Labor Day, and we honor the American labor movement and all they've sought to accomplish. And so part of JUFJ's economic justice campaign is the Fair Share for Maryland plan. They also have one for DC, by the way. I don't think anyone here is a Washington. Oh, you're a Washington. Okay. So there's also a DC plan. Do we have any Virginians in the moment? Good, at the moment. Okay, good, because they only work in Maryland and DC. So I'm sure there's something happening in Virginia. Rachel, if you're watching, I'm sure there's something in Virginia. But right now we have DC and Maryland. This is how JUFJ describes it. So they're working on the Fair Share for Maryland plan, which has to do with the I cut it at some point. There's a name for it. The Maryland, it's back there. The Fair Share for Maryland Act. Jewish tradition, they say, teaches that in a just world, all people would have resources sufficient for their needs. But large corporations and the very wealthy have created loopholes in Maryland's tax code so that they can hoard wealth, while many black and brown, low income, and marginalized Marylanders can't afford housing, food, health care, or child care. The Fair Share for Maryland plan is a comprehensive proposal to address Maryland's regressive taxation and generate much-needed revenue. The legislation would reduce taxes for those who can't pay, demand that the wealthiest pay their fair share, and fund the services and infrastructure that we rely on. So it includes things like raising $1.6 billion in revenue each year for schools and healthcare and transportation and the state workforce, cutting taxes for the poorest Marylanders, and adjusting the tax system, which has disproportionately affected Marylanders of color. Now again, as Rabbi Tamar Elad Appelman taught, it's not about not having wealth. We're allowed to have wealth. It's about also making sure that the most vulnerable among us get their equitable share. Here's one of the many reasons why Maryland could use this law passed. This is Emily Blank. She's a JFUJ leader, and it's better coming from her than from me. Maryland public schools need more funding, she says. A close friend of mine is a teacher who has special education students mainstreamed into her class, but no aides to work with these students. The aides in her school are needed to fill in for other teachers who have quit. As each teacher leaves, the remaining work is divided among fewer teachers who are further demoralized and may then quit. She says it's simply not fair that teachers are not only dealing with increased burdens due to tax cuts in education budgets, but they're also purchasing their own materials for the classrooms. And they're also paying more taxes than corporations that are being subsidized by the state from these very teachers' tax dollars. And so she continues that the Fair Share Maryland Act would help ensure that the corporations and the wealthiest 1% pay their fair share, adds more revenue, etc. So what can we do? What can we here at BJC do? First of all, we can join an economic justice event. JUFJ has a few, and there's going to be flyers out back. Gerald will put some flyers out back for you to pick up. There's a DC one, and there's a Maryland one, and you can read about some of the information from JUFJ and their campaigns. You can also write to our legislators. We can ask them to pass the Fair Share for Maryland Act. If you're in DC, I was a little confused by it, but I guess they're redoing their tax code, or they're proposing revisions to their tax code, and that's an opportunity to say, hey, this is what matters to us. Of course, we can also vote. I don't know how many days we are, 86, something like that? 67. Really? 67. I did not believe you, but 67 days until the election. We can make sure we vote for the causes that matter to us, whether that's economic justice, racial justice, democracy, reproductive rights, or anything else. And again, we can learn and we can act. 67. Now, will doing all this fix everything? Of course not. But it's our duty as Jews, as Marylanders and Washingtonians and Virginians, as human beings to fight for equity and justice. Because our rabbis teach, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. So on this Labor Day weekend, as we partner with Jews United for Justice and celebrate our labor movement, may we not desist from, may we actually do the important work of fighting for fair taxation, economic justice, and equity. Amen. And so we'll continue with the singing of Lo Alecha, page 341